Welcome to the final part of this 3-part video series. We got some more classics here, and we end on a pretty good one. Thanks for making it this far, let's go. The Monster Maker has everything a 40s B-movie needs. A mad scientist, a man with a deformity they're passing off as a monster, and a guy in a cheap gorilla suit. The mad scientist in question is Dr. Igor Markov, as generic a name as they come. He's a real creep towards this lady, who resembles his dead wife. He injected his old wife with experimental science juice that gave her acromegaly, but rather than thank him for making her ugly, a bit of a problem with that plan, she ended her life instead. After he assaults the new lady's father, Markov injects him with the experimental science juice, and he starts a slow transformation into a lumpy monster. A scheme to coerce his daughter's hand of marriage out of him. Acromegaly is an actual condition, but this movie seems to think it gives you super strength.
You have set yourself up as a Frankenstein and created a monster.
Close enough.
My name, it's pronounced Frankenstein.
Markov's assistant keeps threatening to leave him after learning about all the crazy shit he's doing, but she acts like she's seeing him do it for the first time, as if it wasn't completely obvious that this man is not worth sticking around for.
You have never meant anything more, and you never shall. Keep that in mind.
He's the type of guy to send a gorilla after you if you misbehave. This movie sounds crazy, but honestly it's a bit of a letdown. Not a lot of action here, and the sluggish pacing isn't in service of a suspenseful film. Not very good. On to the next movie.
The dead have no place among the living.
I shall be the judge of that.
The Monster Walks. Out of the 4 gorilla movies on this collection, this is the first one to feature an actual, real, breathing ape. A chimpanzee. Chimp Bros, where are you at? Anyways, there's a guy with a monkey arm running around or something. Not gonna lie, couldn't get into this one. It's just not particularly engaging. It's one of those early 30s movies where they were still working with sound, so the performances are a little too theatrical, but the lack of music does add to the tension. It is pretty scary for the characters to be talking only to get interrupted by chimp screaming.
Lifeless limbs.
That's kind of all there is to it. Time for the next movie, and let me tell you, it's a doozy.
Night of the Living Dead.
Night of the Living Dead is a very influential 1968 horror film. While not the first to feature what we would consider zombies, it is easily one of the most influential. If it were not for this botched title sequence where they forgot the copyright, we would not have the zombie genre as we know it. The film starts with Barbara and her brother Johnny going to a graveyard to pay respects to their dead father. After Barb is attacked by a strange man, Johnny is killed in the scuffle. Barbara is chased out to a farmhouse, and this will be the primary location for the rest of the film. There she meets a man named Ben, who quickly takes charge of the situation and starts building a line of defense against even more of these mysterious attackers. Eventually, it's discovered a family has been hiding away in the basement the whole time, and tensions rise between Ben and the family dad, Harry.
Well, you're her father. If you're stupid enough to go die in that trap, that's your business. However, I am not stupid enough to follow you.
Through radio and television, it's eventually revealed that these mysterious, lurching attackers are actually the living dead, ghouls as they're called, and they have an appetite that can only be satisfied by human flesh. They're afraid of fire, and a blunt force to the head will put them down for good, but neither of these are enough when there's a whole field of them. As hard as it is, the inhabitants of the house have to work together if they hope to survive the night of the living dead. Having Ben prepare as exposition is delivered via radio is a great way of conveying the direness of the situation, while revealing more about the characters as they listen to it, how they carry themselves while hearing this information.
Tell the people, for God's sake, to get off the streets. Tell them to go home and lock their doors and windows up tight. We don't know what kind of murder-happy characters we have here.
The canted angles, the makeup, the rawness of the TV footage achieved through the shaky handheld, the imagery of the zombies approaching the house in this harsh, heavily contrasted black and white cinematography, the unfair ending. It all contributes to a bleak atmosphere where you dread every development.
I'd drag you out there and feed you those things!
These zombies aren't entirely brain dead either, no. They're capable of using tools to break down a line of defense between them and tasty flesh. Because of Living Dead's status as public domain and wider availability, I first saw this movie at a young age, and it scared me in a way most movies hadn't. This is not the feel-good movie of 1968, and for that you need to be in the right mood to watch it. Of George Romero's Living Dead movies, I think Dawn of the Dead is still my favorite. It's good, but for different reasons. It's a lot more lighthearted and has a fun setting. But the original film still stands as a harrowing movie. Easily one of the best movies of this box set. Put it on for Halloween, for some real chills.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Stop it!
Nightmare Castle is another Italian movie. Its original title being... here we go. Amanti d'Oltremaimo. Golly, I wonder how hard English is for non-English speaking people. A sadistic count kills his unfaithful wife and her lover with a seizure blast. Then he marries another woman many years later, a mentally unstable one at that, and he plans to yoink her fortune from her, once she goes crazy from staying at his spooky castle. Naturally, the lovers he killed didn't like getting offed with seizure blasts, so they return as vengeful spirits and scare him and his new wife. And this manifests in the form of tormenting the wife with the nightmares of early 2010's creepypasta monsters, and also possessing her to attack her ex-husband. Unrelated to all this, but the Count is also a mad scientist. I didn't know how to include this in the plot summary because it's kind of a superfluous element. There's a scene where he kills someone by electrocuting a bath. I'm goofing around with this synopsis, but the film is actually trying to be sophisticated, and despite its exploitation presentation, it succeeds in being a little spooky. One of the first notes for this was how good the score was, and sure enough, it was composed by Ennio Morricone. Pre-Dollars trilogy. Barbara Steele also plays two characters here. Also, she's very pretty. That's it. That's all I've got. It's another dubbed Italian movie. It's fine. Not particularly impressed, but it's above average. The second movie of this video, over 100 years old, Jesus Christ, everyone in this movie is dead. Nosferatu, A Symphony of Horror, is a very early unauthorized adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula. It was almost lost to time when Bram Stoker's estate sued for plagiarism, but it has survived into the modern day through the public domain and restorations. The film follows Hutter, Jonathan Harker's stand-in, who travels to Transylvania to make arrangements for housing for one Count Orlok, Count Dracula's stand-in. Orlok is a strange host. He sleeps during the day and takes an interest in a wound Hutter has when he accidentally cuts himself. And that's because he is Nosferatu, a vampire. Knowing Orlok's housing is right next to his, and that his darling Ellen, Mina's stand-in, may be in danger, he races back to town before Orlok can get there and begin his reign of terror. Nosferatu is the silent horror classic, propped up by Max Schreck's memorable portrayal of Count Orlok, and the many iconic shots he is placed in. Shriek's performance here is so good that he blends right into the role. He's creepy, he's imposing, his body movements are purposefully unnatural. It's a fantastic performance and an iconic look for a monster. The supporting cast isn't as good, but they've got some memorable moments too. Knock, Renfield's stand-in, is absolutely bouncing off the walls with energy. He's great. Other elements of this movie are kinda so-so. For some reason, they depict a werewolf with a spotted African dog or a hyena. It's a very strange inclusion, but it's not a huge part of the movie. The film has an iconic look to it, just this perfect fusion of German expressionist imagery and believable lived-in environments. It's wild we almost lost this movie due to copyright law. Save your tapes, people. Save your tapes. This goes without saying for all these, but if you watch one of these silent movies, make sure to watch the proper restored versions. These cheapo public domain versions are usually terrible. This one in particular, found on the Mill Creek collection, has an obnoxious discordant organ score that plays throughout the entire film, and it doesn't tint any of the scenes, so night sequences lack the proper purple or blue filter. Awful version. Watch the Kino Lorber restoration instead. Anyways, I watched the Mill Creek version with friends, so here's a highlight reel of that.
Oh, yo, okay, so using this we can understand that Jonathan's a bishop, because he can only move on the diagonal squares.
No, he could be a queen.
He could be a queen. He could be a queen?
I have had some frightful dreams, but they were only dreams. I am leaving immediately to return to Banana, and to you.
Does Nosferatu take daytime or nighttime NyQuil when he goes to sleep?
Welcome to Film Theory.
I am obsessed with the idea of Dracula writing over the label of his Dayquil and NyQuil with Sharpie so he doesn't get confused.
Another horror comedy, this time from Paramount. One Body Too Many stars Jack Haley, best known as the Tin Man from The Wizard of Oz. He plays an insurance salesman who gets caught up in a rich family's convoluted inheritance plot. See, their dead uncle is supposed to leave behind an inheritance for the family as long as they stay inside an old dark house. But the salesman is mistaken for a detective sent to guard the uncle's body, and a girl he likes is the next target of the mysterious killer. Bela Lugosi plays another butler in this one, and he has a funny line or two.
What, rain? The rain that's falling down, sir.
So if you want, you could consider this a spiritual sequel to The Gorilla. It's a comedic spin on the old dark house subgenre, where characters spend the night at a haunted house, where spooky things happen. There's more to the filmmaking in this one. It's not a cheapo monogram movie where everything is shot at flat angles. It feels like a proper movie. Due to the transfer, a lot of scenes are maybe a little too dark. And not just because it's a dark house movie. What is this, the 2014 Godzilla movie? A lot of jokes are pretty hit.
For at that very moment, the murderer lurking behind him was preparing to kill the famous detective in cold blood.
Ah, trash. Things like that don't happen.
Or miss.
Venus approaching Jupiter. It must be very interesting for Jupiter.
But Jack Haley is a very likable actor. There's this soft-spoken way he speaks that's very comforting.
You know, the precarious one.
Don't tell me you're falling for that hooey.
You can't tell. There may be something to it after all.
If you enjoyed The Gorilla, then you might like this one too. It's alright.
I'll tell you what. Oh, I can't tell a dead man insurance.
Phantom from 10,000 Leagues. A fish monster kills a man in the cold open, whose body is found on a beach by a biologist and a government agent.
I want you to forget that you're even here tonight, understand?
My good sir, it's the middle of the day. The monster was created by a mad scientist. A really mad scientist.
She's a sneaking, prying female. I should fire her.
Cripes, dude. Too much. He created the monster using a radioactive rock. There is a thrilling romance going on between the biologist and the mad scientist's daughter, and sometimes the monster shows up. The movie's all like, "What you're doing in the realm of science to science this science," and the evil scientist is like, "It's none of your business, science." And it tries to build tension and intrigue, but we already know there's a monster and we already know who made it. There's an attempt at mystery, but we already know the answer right out the gate. It's not like Columbo where we're introduced to a killer and the rest of the episode is about unraveling their alibi. There's no fun structure like that.
Oh, one more thing.
This is like Creature from the Black Lagoon on sedatives. It provides very little in terms of entertainment or even good characters. The monster looks like crap too. But it's an enjoyable shot of adrenaline into this corpse of a movie on the rare occasion it shows up. The message at the end is nonsensical too.
Nature has many secrets that man mustn't disturb. And this was one of them.
Nature had nothing to do with this, it was all man-made. As weak as the Creature from the Black Lagoon sequels were, they knew when to inject monster action to spice things up. This movie has a lot of guys in suits talking, shots of man-asses swimming underwater, and it ends on a low-budget oxygen destroyer, where the mad scientist plans to use dynamite to kill his creation. Leagues is leagues more awkward and sluggish. This movie sucks. Next one.
Kinda narrows the field down, doesn't it? Yes, it seems so.
Speaking of narrowing things down, we've got 10 movies left. Thanks for making it this far, I really appreciate it. This has been a very long journey, but we're in the home stretch. Thank you. In 1910, French author Gaston Leroux released a novel entitled The Phantom of the Opera. 15 years later, an American film adaptation was released, starring Lon Chaney Sr. in the title role. Set in an opera house in Paris, there have been many eyewitness reports of a mysterious man attending performances and living in the opera house, dubbed the Phantom. It turns out the Phantom is real, and he demands that a woman named Christine take the center role in an upcoming opera. His demands are ignored, and another woman takes the stage instead, which he answers in kind by dropping a chandelier on the audience. The Phantom doesn't mess around. Despite this, Christine is still drawn to the Phantom, and he leads her underground to profess his love to her, which she doesn't take too well. In fairness, he did just drop a chandelier on a bunch of people. It turns out his name is Eric, and he has been living in the catacombs below the opera house for years, wearing a mask to hide his hideous deformity. Christine wastes no time unmasking him, and boy, this reveal is a doozy. Yes, this is the guy on the box set cover. It took this long to get to him, and the wait was worth it. Lon Chaney's Phantom is utterly fantastic, the pinnacle of silent film horror acting. His makeup is ghoulish, his voiceless performance reads as effectively commanding and intimidating. He's an overly controlling monster of a character, and that is conveyed strongly in his performance. It's silent acting up there with Max Shriek's Count Orlok. The other performances are very strong too, it's just an overall solid cast. Nosferatu is what I would consider more as the face of silent horror, but Phantom of the Opera is a very worthy contender, and it might just be a little better. It definitely has a more extravagant budget, flexing with its massive sets and fancy costumes. There's this ball sequence halfway through the film that is rendered in mostly full color. It must have taken so much time and energy to get this to look as good as it does. It's really cool. Phantom of the Opera is a very good movie. The best silent movie of this collection. The plot moves along at a suspenseful pacing and it keeps me engaged. There's rarely a dull moment in this movie. Highly recommended. The most interesting thing Revolt of the Zombies has going for it is that it was allegedly going to be a sequel to White Zombie. Bela Lugosi's eyes even appear. Other than that, it's... oh my god, this is rough. Set during World War I, zombies are used for combat. That sounds like an interesting premise, right? Well, no, this is only relevant for one scene in the movie. The rest has them doing manual slave labor in an overtly offensive way. I mean, all of these zombies are non-white actors. It has negative connotations. The film is actually about an all-white cast and a crappy love triangle. There are barely any zombies in this too. The film's scariness hinges on whether or not you think an outdated American view of Asia is spooky. It doesn't suck because of the racism. It's just bad on its own merits, on top of the racism. Horrendous flick, unengaging cinematography, really boring, really slow. It sucks pee-pee dick. Next. I'm going to try to not quote the Cinemassacre review of this because it happens to be my favorite episode of Monster Madness.
Help! It's the Screaming Skull!
Screaming Skull is a delightfully silly palate cleanser. It opens with a guarantee from the producers that a free burial service will be provided to anyone who dies from fright of watching the movie.
Its producers feel they must assure free burial services to anyone who dies of fright while seeing The Screaming Skull.
It sets the mood perfectly for a film as hastily constructed as this one. Do you think anyone tried to capitalize on that offer? Even if they died before they could, I mean, a bit of a problem with that plan to begin with. I don't think they have a strong enough case because this movie is so bad. So the plot of Screaming Skull follows newlyweds Jenny and Eric arriving at a country home for a honeymoon. It's revealed Eric's previous wife died from slipping on a leaf and hitting her head on the rocks near the pond.
Perhaps she slipped on a leaf, hit her head on the edge of the cement wall where we're sitting.
Which smashed her skull on impact.
Base of her skull was smashed.
So Eric has pictures of her around the house. You know, a very normal thing to do for your new wife. Though in fairness, it was probably the gardener Mickey who put those there, who has a connection with the old wife, and he's the resident red herring for the following events. The old wife happens to look exactly like Jenny's mother too, who died in a drowning accident.
She was very beautiful. Very gay.
How this plays into the plot, I'm not sure. The movie seems intent on being needlessly convoluted, and it doesn't build towards anything that connects all these threads satisfactorily. At night, Jenny has spooky encounters with the ghost of Eric's ex-wife, a disembodied skull. Spoilers for the Screaming Skull, but it's Eric who's placing the skull around the house, for nebulous reasons at that. More spooky gaslighting, I guess.
There's no skull there, darling. There is no skull there, Jenny.
Apparently it was for her money that she apparently had.
Why did he do it?
Your money.
Yet it's revealed that the ghost of his ex-wife is real and is coming after him. And it also happens to be a disembodied skull. What's more confusing, if the skull was smashed in like they said, why is this one perfectly intact? It'd be a spooky visual to have a cracked skull wandering around, sure, but whatever. It's the fact that it's a skull, too. One that's rolling around and flying through the air making car screeching noises. It's just laughable. For a plot as poorly conceived as this one, the film does have its own merits. It's got some good cinematography from Academy Award winner Floyd Crosby. It's not super extravagant, but it does the job with its slow trucking and panning. The film has some spooky, haunting shots as a result, but it's all destroyed by how convoluted the story is. It's so bad, but it's so good. Watch this one with friends. A Shriek in the Night is another early sound film. Shriek in the Night is the inciting incident. Pretty attention-grabbing opening.
Somebody is a little drunk.
Unfortunately, the movie doesn't do much to hold my attention. By being an early sound film, you feel every second because of the deafening white noise.
Just trying to remember her lines.
Yeah, you can probably
read
use
them.
It's shot like a stage play, and you know how I feel about B-movies shot like that. The blocking is just the characters all wandering around like it's a stage production. Anyways, Humble Squid showed me Mr. Boop, and I read that instead of actually paying attention. Funny webcomic. Anyways, on to the next movie. I'm not sure why this is in the horror movie collection.
I like that even though you have it, like, it's probably 1.5 times speed. There are still these, like, really pregnant pauses, and I can't imagine watching it on normal speed, because even on this sped up thing, I'm like, this is excessive.
Right off the bat, I want to say Swamp Women is a ripoff. There are women in swamps, but there are no swamp women. Where are the mud monster women? Cowards. I'm not interested in this non-mud womanless crap. They should have called this Bio Bitches. I'm sorry, that was mean. Anyways, the film is about a bunch of escaped women convicts who are looking for diamonds in the Louisiana swamp. They kidnap this couple in the middle of their search.
Better tie you up again.
It's getting to feel natural.
It also turns into a shitty harem anime, when the guy's girlfriend dies and the prison women vie for his attention. There is no character development, very little plot progression. All they do is bicker at each other. It's a slog, which I guess is appropriate because it's in a swamp. The film stumbles through these scenes with very little grace and it ends abruptly. Yep, it's an early Roger Corman movie. It barely counts as a horror movie. There are horror elements, like a scene where a alligator and snake attack. The snake attack suddenly makes the film turn piss yellow. That's kind of scary. Why does it look like this?
I guess they ran out of the reels and had to use this bootleg. You've entered the piss zone. Never mind.
Anyways, this movie's fucking bad. Don't watch it.
Why the fuck is he in here?
What happened to the film? What was
that was fine.
Honestly, if we went in alphabetical order, we'd have a pretty weak conclusion, so I'll be saving the terror for later, so I have something interesting to talk about for the final film. Trust me, it'll be worth the wait. This film is something else. Finally, a real horror movie. Tormented is a film from 1960, directed by Burt I. Gordon, whose initials are B.I.G., and that's because he made movies about giants. Giant monsters. Tormented, however, is not about giant monsters. Why didn't I just do the science fiction box set? The film opens on a pretty snazzy intro song. The main character, Tom Stewart, is a jazz musician, so it's thematically fitting. And so is the rest of the score. Tom is engaged to another woman, but an ex shows up and tries to blackmail him into leaving her. Their spat leads to the top of a lighthouse, where she falls to her death. Tom is now wrecked with guilt for not saving her, and for the remainder of the film, he encounters a number of spooky occurrences, and they may not just be psychological. He's tormented. Bazinga! Tormented straddles the line between genuinely decent and so bad it's good, just so hard. So I'm going to meet it halfway and call it enjoyably cheesy. The filmmaking here is pretty solid, which is rare for a director of schlock like B.I.G. There are some bumps in the pacing though. There's this character who tries to blackmail Tom, and his scenes are kind of a drag. One thing with the script that I don't care for is that it doesn't know how to treat Tom as a character, whether he's an asshole who's willing to kill to avoid a smear on his reputation, or someone who genuinely cares about people he loves. He's pushed into killing by the ghost lady, but he still makes the choice to do so. At the end, spoilers, he's willing to even kill a child because she heard him kill the last guy. He's a bit disturbed, yeah, but his downfall is handled clumsily. The child acting is pretty decent. The supporting cast is pretty decent too. This is a film defined by really funny moments, like when the head of the girl appears to Tom, so he wraps it up to keep her from talking. The muffled speaking is what makes it. This film knows how to use its score, diegetic and non-diegetic, to punctuate moments for effect.
I still have your letters.
Murder?
It's good, cheesy fun. Highly recommended with a group to riff on it.
What do you want?
The Vampire Bat, our single V movie on the list. Ooh. It's another early sound film from the 30s, but this one is actually pretty alright. A mysterious entity is going around committing murders in a small village, and a police inspector, played by Melvin Douglas, is tasked with getting to the bottom of it. He doesn't believe in the supernatural, and his way of expressing this disbelief is pretty peculiar.
From their graves in the dead of night to attack their victims and drink the blood from their veins.
Lionel Atwill also plays a doctor who is up to some spooky things. Dwight Fry plays another crazy man, and Fay Wray, Anne from King Kong, also stars in this. The Vampire Bat is a perfectly watchable film.
I'm a doomed man! You kill me! You kill me! I'm doomed! You kill me! You kill me! I'm a doomed man! You kill me!
It's got some strange moments though. I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be a little comedic, but without accompanying music, so many of these moments read as awkward more so than funny. The filmmaking is functional, but not all too impressive. We got some decent camera movements, and the film can be successfully eerie without musical accompaniment. Perfectly watchable, but it's not a must-see.
Are your kisses dynamite?
White Zombie is a film I have mixed feelings about. A fiancé and his bride travel to a plantation to get married, which is something that bothers the owner. The owner then asks the resident voodoo hypnotist, played by Bela Lugosi, to use his voodoo powers to turn the bride into a zombie to get her to fall in love with him. But it starts to go horribly wrong. He does start to have second thoughts about it, especially when he himself starts to turn into a zombie. This is a film that moves at an incredibly slow pace. Some would call it glacial, zombie-like even. And while it's not what I would consider great, the slow pacing at least feels purposeful here, rather than a way of filling time as the B-side of a double feature. It's slow because it's building an atmosphere, a surreal atmosphere where Bela Lugosi's eyes travel around the screen. The lack of music is less of a restriction and more of a cinematic tool. So when there is a musical score, it is natural, diegetic within the film, further adding to the ambiance. Isolated sounds like the creaking of the mill adds to the ambiance too. The film does have non-diegetic music too, but it is used sparingly. The way Bela Lugosi just stares into the camera is mesmerizing. He has this imposing presence that can be felt even when he's not on screen. The other actors, not so much.
I'd give my life to make you happy.
There are some nice sets and matte paintings here. This film does have production value. There are a couple strange choices though, like the decision to have the scene transition happen after holding on this guy's butt. What, is there a portal to the next scene in there? I'd kill to know who voiced that bird though. He sounds like he's having a fun time. Some pretty hokey dialogue by today's standards too.
She must be gay and happy again.
In the old times, gay used to mean happy, so like, is he saying she should be happy and happy? Or did he mean something else?
I have taken a fancy to you, monsieur.
I'm ribbing this movie, but it is a cult classic for a reason. It has a number of things going for it, but it's a little too slow for my liking. I feel as though, given time, it's something I can learn to appreciate.
Zombies. Yes.
The World Gone Mad is another early sound film from the 30s. It is a crime drama, not a horror film, but a crime drama. The Terror is a 1963 horror film directed by Roger Corman. In a couple ways, it feels like a culmination of this entire review series. It features a handful of artists we've seen so far. We've got Floyd Crosby from The Screaming Skull doing uncredited camera work. Jack Nicholson, who earlier appeared in Little Shop of Horrors, also stars in this movie, and was one of the 6 credited directors. We've got Stuart Bryan from Dementia 13 doing editing. Speaking of Dementia 13, Francis Ford Coppola is allegedly one of the 6 people credited with directing the movie. B-movie actor Dick Miller, also from Little Shop of Horrors, also returns. Not to mention Boris Karloff headlines. And of course, the man behind it all, the producer, is Roger Corman. The film started life as a quick production. You know, just something to put Boris Karloff in while they still had them. Karloff's scenes were shot in 2 days, and the rest of the movie languished in production hell for 9 months. I'm pretty sure they didn't really have a story planned for this. So, what is the plot of The Terror? I'm glad you asked. It opens with a scene featuring Boris Karloff as a baron, opening a door only to be greeted by a skeleton. This is never mentioned again. We are then introduced to Jack Nicholson's character, a lost French soldier named Andre, who is led to a spooky castle by a mysterious disappearing woman. He travels to the castle and meets the baron, who tells him the woman was his baroness and died 20 years ago. Her death is the subject of mystery, and Andre really wants to know her deal, so he corners everyone in the castle for questions.
Then this became her tomb? Why did you remove the portrait of the Baroness from the wall? Now, what happened to the Baroness? Was her death violent?
Yes, her death was violent.
The ghost, Ilsa, has been hypnotized to haunt the Baron by a peasant. So then Andre leaves the castle and finds the man who sent him in that direction, getting his eyes pecked out by a bird. In his dying breath, he tells Andre to protect the ghost of the Baroness. It turns out the Baron isn't the Baron, but a man named Eric who took the Baron's place after killing him, staying in the castle for 20 years to atone for his guilt, slowly convincing himself he is the Baron. It turns out the peasant woman who's commanding the ghost to torment him is Eric's mother, who still thinks the Baron killed Eric, even though the Baron is Eric. Got all that?
She's used the girl as a puppet to drive the Baron to suicide.
I will say it is impressive how the plot for this movie manages to remain comprehensible, but you can practically see the cheap glue holding it all together.
Baron, you mustn't go down!
And it creeps along at an obnoxiously slow pace, made up of scenes of characters just wandering around the castle. It doesn't help that the script is a confusing cluster truck of ye olde speak, and it comes off as very stilted.
I am possessed of the dead.
You're a warm, living woman. Who has told you these things?
The dead.
Jack Nicholson doesn't bring his A game here. This was one of his earlier movies, so I can't be too hard on him, but he was great in The Little Shop of Horrors, so it's less excusable. With dialogue like this, I can't really blame him for being so wooden, though.
You seem to have things strangely confused in your mind.
The fact that we even got a movie at all is a miracle, with how haphazardly produced the whole thing feels. It can be somewhat entertaining at points. The peasant woman character is conveniently removed from the movie in an amusing way. She holds a metal fence and it's struck by lightning, just out of nowhere. Because they didn't know how to end her role in the movie. Schlocky stuff like that is great, but most of the film is people wandering around in dark rooms. That's never fun. The film's marketing poses the question, who is the Terror? I've seen the movie, and I'd like to know too.
There are certain other mysteries I would like to have explained, Baron, and I mean to have them explained.
This collection sucks. A lot of movies here aren't even horror movies. I mean, I already know a couple public domain movies that would make for better inclusions here. Come on, Black Dragons, really? Over the Devil Bat? There are other Mill Creek box sets that have more appropriate choices, but this one has a lot of just baffling ones. But yeah, I hope this video proves that you shouldn't always write off a film for being bad just because it's in the public domain. There will always be a diamond in the rough.
Well, I guess there's just no accounting for people's tastes.
And with that, I would like to give a special shout out to my friends on the Discord for watching some of these movies with me. I would also like to thank Astounding Beyond Belief for fact hunting some of these movies. And with that, I would like to give a very special shout out to my $5 patrons for making videos like this possible. CMG, Red Comet Harry, Marpzilla, and Space Hunter M. Thank you very much.